You know, it's funny. I'm an elder millennial who was always a big JRPG enjoyer and a pretty big anime enjoyer to boot. I've played hundreds of hours of Pokemon games over the years and thousands of hours of JRPGs. And despite all of this, somehow, in those 38 years, I've never once crossed paths with the Digimon universe. But 2025 is a different year for me. I got laid off from a high-powered career of 15 years, and in a defiant whim started this here little RPG YouTube channel. While I probably honestly would have overlooked this entry in any other year due to sheer busyness, to say nothing of how inundated we've been with good game releases, this game's release, the buzz it's created in the online RPG community, the fact that I'm a budding YouTuber myself, and the free demo that's sitting right there for anyone to access were all enough reason that I'd finally correct this blind spot of mine, even just a little, and at long last step into the Digimon universe myself to see what the fuss is all about. Here I should put a minor spoiler warning. I'll talk in reasonable depth about the entirety of the demo, which should take you no more than an hour or two to clear, depending on your play speed. Nothing major, but I like to err on the side of caution. To begin, you choose between a male or a female lead, and then quickly get thrown into a cartoon opening scene that just really didn't do anything for me. I didn't dislike it, and maybe it's because I'm a franchise newbie who has exactly zero attachment to this universe. Maybe long-term fans had their nostalgia tickled or something. For me, it was just there. Indifferently, I carried on. I selected the hard difficulty, the hardest difficulty available to me. The next sequence was cool enough. The background music is groovy and set up cool city vibes that I was here for. While not excruciating, I felt a bit annoyed at how many times the operator called me in the first 5 minutes of gameplay. Maybe this is a player preference thing. I like to learn by doing, organically, rather than being interrupted by a tutorial every 30 seconds. It was a little annoying, but in fairness, it didn't last that long and got better as the demo progressed. In addition to the cool music, I found the visuals to be quite good. I can get down with the bright JRPG aesthetic, and I thought the cityscape, vehicles, and structures all looked good and more or less like I'd expect in a modern JRPG with stylized graphics. And further, the tense atmosphere of something being wrong kept me engaged enough to try to figure out what was coming next. I should add, I really appreciate how good of a job this game does narratively in onboarding a newcomer to the franchise such as myself. For a 30-year-old franchise, it does not take for granted that I'd have any idea what Digimon are, and I didn't. So they're taking the time to explain what they are narratively was more than welcome. I took the little devil-looking Mon as my first and proceeded onward. The combat was a pretty standard turn-based affair, like you might expect out of a Mon game. I'm sure there's a good amount of depth I'll only learn about the game's mechanics if I should choose to proceed with getting the whole game. More on that later. But if you take turns attacking or using abilities, faster Mons go first, and there are two different domains of weaknesses. There are attributes and elementals. Basically, these are two categories that can work to reduce or amplify damage. Best I could tell, the most damage you could do would be to target any enemy who is weak to both the attribute, this is determined by the Mon, and the elemental, determined by the ability you attack with. Nothing too crazy, but you get up to a party of 3 active Mons, which is different, and I should add more fun than Pokemon story battles for me personally. I just generally like to have a party rather than a one-on-one fight. Between fights, you can very easily get free damage and an initiative attack just by pressing the correct button, it was R2 on my controller, whenever you see an enemy Mon in the field. Sometimes this just defeats them without even getting into the turn-based fight altogether, and either way, I thought this feature was nice. Being able to more easily clear through trash encounters is something I personally like in turn-based RPGs. Reduction in grinding and tedium is a welcome thing. In this first combat zone, I made two other observations. First, when you stand still and do nothing, usually for a period of about 5 to 10 seconds, your party gets fully healed. An interesting design choice, and certainly different from any Pokemon game I've played, and unlike most RPGs too. Basically, you can full heal after every fight, which is fine. I remember Chained Echoes was designed to be like that, and I thought it completely worked there. Still, this made me wonder why you don't just fully heal automatically after fight, rather than having to wait for that several second pause. It just seemed like added tedium and delay for no apparent reason. The only reason I could think of was if later in the game there was some sort of gauntlet or boss rush where the game did not want you to be able to heal between fights. I can't say for sure. Secondly, you can obtain new Digimon for your army simply by fighting those Digimon in question. Once you reach at least 100% of the Digimon scan, or up to 200% if you want improved stats, you can synthesize that Mon and add it to your roster. I have to say, I actually really liked this system. It beats the hell out of the annoying tedium of Pokemon catching, in my opinion. Just fight enemies and earn Mons passively through combat? Sign me up. Though I will say I found myself, especially as a franchise newbie, quickly overwhelmed with how many Mons are in my roster and how many Mons each Mon could evolve or sometimes devolve into. Maybe this isn't a big thing to franchise veterans, but it was a lot for me to take in. Still, this registered as more of a strength of the game than a weakness to me. Mon games are honestly not my favorite thematically. I prefer more personal and human stories, but if I am going to play a monster collecting game, I'll take all the customization and team building I can get. And I should add that team building in this game feels really smooth by comparison to any Pokemon game I've ever played. Rather than having to hike to town and booting up a slow PC to juggle Mons from dozens of boxes, here you can just swap your active party with any Mon you have in your reserve at any time right from a single menu. I loved this. Exploration was pretty basic and linear for the chunks I was able to play. I know some people hate linearity, but honestly, I don't. Especially not in a game that's story driven and focusing on other things. Sometimes linearity just makes the play experience a bit more passive and chill, and in many moods, that's what I seek in a game. So while the linearity didn't bother me, I could see how it may bother others. I will say with regards to exploration, within the narrow slice of the demo at least, which I concede very well might not be representative of the greater experience, the scenario design was fantastic. Traipsing through a crumbling building, mayhem beyond the windows with a colossal monster attacking the structure was awesome. Pivoting to the narrative, everybody online will tell you that Digimon is darker and more mature than Pokemon, which is definitely true. And for me personally, the darker, the better. Granted, being darker than Pokemon is a bar so low, I don't even think you would be able to walk a crab under it. So do with that information what you will. For me, I could see how this story was dark-ish. That fast-moving shadow thing was kind of creepy. The monsters genuinely felt like a threat to humanity. But really, I felt like I had a hard time getting a read on this game's tone personally. And to be honest, I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. On one hand, it's kind of cool that I spent a couple of hours with a demo and have no idea what to expect. But on the other, I'm sitting on the business end of a minimum $70 paywall between me and an experience where I have no idea what to expect. So I call this a blessing and a curse. And since I brought up the price tag, I have to say that this game's monetization is definitely the biggest mark against it from my fresh eyes point of view. $70 is a beefy price tag on its face, and the fact that this game launched with paid DLC on day one, alongside a $120 deluxe edition that doesn't even include said paid DLC, are practices which, let me not mince words, I find pretty gross. I'm a pretty big vote with your wallet kind of guy, so I found this aggressive monetization to be really off-putting to me. Before I give closing thoughts, why don't I provide a bulleted list of the game's pros, the cons, and the things that I was more indifferent about. Let's start with the list of pros as I saw them. The stylized graphics and monster designs were cool and really worked for me. The music was excellent and did a great job setting this game's vibe. Monster acquisition, rostering, and customization is very slick and accessible for a game like this. All enemies are on screen and trash encounters can be cleared very quickly. The first scenario was intense and brilliantly designed. The premise and the story are solid, and I'd genuinely like to learn more about what's going on. Next, let's look at some neutral aspects. Turn-based combat was solid, but easy even on hard, and didn't feel particularly groundbreaking to me. Scenario design was very linear. I personally liked it, but I know some players will not. It was hard to get a read on this game's tone and angle even after a couple of hours with it. And for the cons, this game is very aggressively monetized with a $70 box price, day one DLC, and a $120 deluxe edition that doesn't even include the DLC. The protagonist is a self-insert. I know that this is common in Mon games, but I prefer an actual lead character in story-rich games like this personally. At least in the early game, the operator calls you way too much, and at least for the time I played, it really stifled the flow. Maybe this gets better over time. Overall, I thought the demo was an excellent experience, and I'm genuinely interested to learn more. As a first foray into this franchise, I can definitely see why it has such a loyal following. It has a unique vibe that I still can't quite put my finger on yet. Unfortunately, this game's very aggressive monetization gives me pause about moving any further, however, and this is the one black mark bringing everything else down from my point of view. If I find a gap in my play schedule, I would love to give this game a closer look, as I really am curious to see more here, but in a year where we're just flush with banger releases, most of which are much more fairly monetized, it's hard to justify prioritizing this over others on the docket. Still, I welcome any and all feedback in the comments. Am I only scratching the surface of an iceberg here? Do you strongly recommend that I delve further? I'm certainly open to community feedback on this one. Thanks so much for tuning in, everyone. I'm Nick BRPG, and I discuss all things RPG, with JRPGs being my favorite. If you liked this video, consider giving me a like and a sub. I'm a brand new YouTuber, and your support means the world to me. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.